As a motivation source, today we are bringing something unique from top of the world. This is about the success story and the career highlights regarding Dr. and Professor Michael Posner.
Well, my father was born in Denver, Colorado. His father had migrated from what was sometimes Russia and sometimes Poland, but rather than settling in New York where so many of the Jewish migrants went, he actually went to Denver and set up a shoe shop there.
His creative ideas and innovative thinking made him to accelerate at the path of remarkable success. He is helping and supporting millions of themes and ideas for development of the world. He was awarded National Medal of Science by United States of America President Barack Obama. Today, Professor and Dr. Mike is a source of inspiration for large section of people. He did major in physics.
In physics in college, I wasn't very good at it, but it was extremely beautiful.
Professor Mike was having access to the world top class facilities. Therefore, he could provide empirical evidences behind his research. He is one of the most cited psychologists of 20th century.
We had clocks, we could measure things in millisecond accuracy.
He got interested in attention since the early 1960s. His source of motivation was Donald Broadbent's book, Perception and Communication. He was inspired by his own work with pole fields.
I loved physics. It's a very romantic field. Finding out the nature of the fundamental particles of the world is important. But I wasn't really good enough in physics to ever teach it. So my brother said, well, try a biological science. Maybe it'll be a little easier for you. And I did try biophysics. I actually didn't do too well at that either. But during the time I was in the military, I took a correspondence course from USAFI in psychology. It's the first time I had had psychology. It's an introductory course, and it was actually graded by a professor at the University of Washington, and we got into some correspondence. And then when I came back from my Army service, which was only 6 months at that time,
Dr. Mike was the focal point of many of dramatic change. You know what was the goal of Professor Mike? Yes, it was his intention to map the mind to the brain. That is, to find out the function of different parts of brain and how does structures interact with each other inside the brain.
I've always been interested in trying to ask fundamental questions. And of course, cognitive neuroscience has the human brain, which is complicated, not as complicated maybe as a whole natural world, but pretty complicated, and gives us a chance to work on fundamental questions.
One major contribution was POSNER model of attention. He explained that there are different networks of attention in the brain. Professor Mike was more interested in finding influence of genetics on development of attention network. He therefore explained 3 stages of attention orientation.
Yes, I would like to tell you about that. I'm doing my first animal research since I was just got my undergraduate degree and tried biophysics. And so that's about 60 years ago. And the reason I'm doing this animal research is because in our work with training humans, we found changes in white matter pathways using diffusion tensor imaging, a version of MRI. And I wanted to know how could this white matter be changed by various kinds of training? And of course, we're not the only ones who found white matter changes with various kinds of training. And I came up with a hypothesis, and it suggested that it might be the frontal theta that's produced by the meditation. And through colleagues in the biology department, I have set up some experiments with mice in which we're imposing frontal theta using a technique called optogenetics with laser light. And then we hope to see whether we get changes in the white matter pathways, which can be assayed with electron microscopy.
Regarding one of his breakthrough research, he did provide POSNER paradigm to this world. This is a psychological test to assess attention. It has been used and modified to assess disorders and focal brain injury. In his book, Educating the Human Brain, he explains how the brain performs functions that are necessary for learning. The author suggests how brain development can support literacy and expertise. Example, within a few minutes of practice and learning, the brain networks involved change radically. He as a whole focused on transfer of training. Despite a very big think tank, he is still very humble and down-to-earth personality. He loves to help the young brain. His interest in psychology is even more than it was 60 years back.
I am fully retired, but I can do what I like to do. Of course, I like to do psychology, and I have quite an active psychology research program.
Let us try to understand about the message of Dr. Michael for you.
You just have to learn to deal with that if you want to persist and succeed in psychology. And in the groups that I directed, we always tried to provide pretty gentle criticism, but get people used to criticism. I always present it myself and hope people would get the idea that I learned from being criticized too. And so I think there are a lot of things you can do to help make the group a strong instructional situation for graduate students and postdocs.
We are getting a very big message here. The message for youth is to work with full dedication. One day you can be pretty famous. Let us try to explore more regarding Professor personal life.
Well, we were married in 1958. That is quite a while ago. And actually, she's right now attending her 60th high school reunion in Vancouver, British Columbia. And she she did stay at home in the early part of our child raising years. But when the children left and went off to various things, she went into television. She first started off as an assistant, and then she was so good, they asked her if she would do interviews on the local TV channel. And she did do interviews, and she did do the news, and she was really locally pretty famous.
Let us have a thumbs up for Dr. and Professor Michael Posner regarding his breakthrough research in psychology. And let us have a clapping for Dr. and Professor for his unstoppable passion. We are very, very thankful to Professor and Dr. Mike for his support regarding our project and different things. Thank you.